if they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard. We've been told that the killing in Iran is stopping. It's stopped. It's stopping. And there's no plan for executions or executions. So I've been told that a good authority.
Okay, is the president's position on the Iranian regime softening, or is his more subdued tone the last couple of days the quiet before the storm? Well, let's bring it back to our panel to see what they think. Welcome back, panel. So the Wall Street Journal has this headline. They say President Trump was told an attack on Iran wouldn't guarantee collapse of regime. He was advised the U.S. military would need more firepower in the Middle East to launch large strike attack and protect American forces. So Matt, listen, the president says no one convinced him, he convinced himself, but we know there are more military assets moving to the region.
Absolutely. If I was a betting man, I wouldn't be taking the over on the Ayatollah anytime soon. I mean, I think this particular instance we saw last week was less retreat and more restraint. I think, the president doesn't love taking pictures, to use baseball parlance, but this one was a little outside the strike zone. I think what you saw was the Iranian security apparatus held, the protests didn't really fracture the regime, and any really application of force probably would have just drove us deeper in a situation we didn't want to be in. Now, I think if the regime pops off again, if they miscalculate, doesn't mean the response this past time is going to guarantee the same response in the future. So that's what I'm watching.
Okay. Our buddy Andrew McCarthy over at National Review says this: while it is in our vital interest to see the regime deposed, it is not in our interest to achieve that outcome by a ground invasion and occupation. We can do a lot to further hollow out the regime's capacity to project power, but only the Iranian people can push it over. And Josh, that's a real heavy lift.
Well, look, one of the reasons why the administration pulled back last week is I don't think they had the military assets. They didn't have the planning for what would happen if they tried to pursue large-scale military action. I'm not so convinced that they're not still going to go ahead with it. You're seeing the buildup this week. You're seeing Senator Graham in the region talking about Trump really eager to take action. And you're hearing the Ayatollah continuing to taunt Donald Trump. And if we know one thing about President Trump is that's one thing that can spur him to act. Maduro learned that the hard way in Venezuela. So if I'm the Ayatollah, I might not be sleeping easy these next couple weeks. I do think that the military option is still on the table, and this week is going to be a very interesting one in the region.
Yeah, I mean, is Mary Catherine, is that sort of what this lull is about, is getting our things into place, or is the president really being cautioned about a potential broader conflict there that he's worried about?
I think it's probably a little bit of both, and that people are discussing whether this is sort of a rope-a-dope to get information about where Iran is. Look, the threat still exists, and I think there is a little bit for the Trump administration. They look back on 2013 in Syria and Obama's red line, 2009, the Green Movement, and many people argue like, hey, there's some maybe regime red line regret here and being worried about that. He has given encouragement himself to the Iranian protesters, which means if you don't follow up and you don't help, and I would not preclude the fact that people have been helping behind the scenes in pretty serious ways here. But if you don't help, I think part of what plays into this is his own reputation. He has cultivated a bit of a madman theory that he will act in these situations. And if he doesn't, I think he will take into account what that would do for his threat credibility.
Yeah, I mean, ask Soleimani.
Well,
and the Iran nuclear program.
Well, and look, the problem is, though, if the goal is to support the protesters and ultimately get a change in regime, I do not think that American military action is the way to do that. Even with occupation and hundreds of thousands of ground troops in a place like Iraq or Afghanistan, we have seen how hard it is to force a democratic transition onto a country coming out of authoritarianism. So I think behind the scenes, helping get the internet back up, helping Iranians get some of this information out of the country, there are quiet ways that the U.S. and Israel have done for many years to weaken this regime. But the best look, once a regime has to use such a level of violence, the Iranian regime has never had to, in the last couple decades, quite frankly, kill so many protesters to stay in power. That is not a good sign for the long-term longevity. Now, can the U.S. make this happen with an airstrike that guarantees an outcome we would be happy with? There is no evidence in history. There's certainly no evidence we've ever seen that that would be the case. So the best thing we can do is support the protesters quietly, continue to weaken the Iranian regime, and not do things that cause the Iranian people to rally around the flag, like, I don't know, take more military strikes on their country.
Well, as you said, probably a lot of things happening behind the scenes, cyber attacks,
Exactly.
all kinds of
Well,
things.
there's also
Talk of
evidence
Starlink
that-
into the country.
There's also evidence
Exactly.
that not acting militarily and not backing up threats leads to 10 to 15 more years of brutality from said regimes in those places, although it is obviously not a silver bullet to strike.
Yeah, it's not. It's not an easy call, and that's why the commander-in-chief has the toughest job in the world. So let's talk about Greenland, which he's very interested in. Here are some headlines in juxtaposition for you. The Atlantic says Trump is risking a global catastrophe. His irrational fixation on Greenland could lead to widespread conflict. An opinion piece over at FoxNews.com says Trump knows good real estate, and he knows Greenland's value to national security. Trump has lit a bonfire under Denmark and NATO to spur much-needed progress to counter Russia and China. And Josh, could that be the end game here? Let's beef up forces, let's get more serious, or do you think he actually wants that for the U.S.?
No, I think he wants it for the U.S., and that's causing a rupture with our European allies in a way that could have very serious long-term consequences. It also doesn't have a whole lot of public support in the United States. There was a poll by Quinnipiac that came out this week. Less than 10% of Americans want us to use any kind of military action to get Greenland for the United States. There is a diplomatic way to have Denmark offer more territory to help with our national security needs, but I don't think we've been looking to go in that direction. And you can hear that the Europeans and you see from the Denmark leadership, there's panic on what the intentions of the United States are. So this is one of those moves. I understand that there are opportunities economically and for national security reasons that Greenland's an important region for the United States. To threaten military action is something that causes a lot of backlash.
Well, Matt, we've seen a lot of pushback, and especially when the president dropped those tariff threats yesterday.
Yeah, no, all the hysteria from the media, the Europeans, Democrats helps increase the leverage. Like, we're not rolling in like Patton into Bastogne into Greenland. We're not making the 51st state. This is going to end with some deal on rare earths or security cooperation. He'll go there for a photo op. Look, I'm not a parent, but I know many of you guys are. I think of it when parents count to 3. At 3, they need to believe there's a consequence. Otherwise, behavior doesn't change. So the hysteria feeds into the leverage to extract more, I think, from a lot of these concessions we're seeing.
And by the way, Canada has dibs on 51st state.
That's true.
So
52.
before it goes to Greenland.
I mean, Matt, I hope you're right, but I think if he continues down this path, if he puts tariffs on our allies to try and pressure them to give us a place we do not need for any security reason, this will be the end of NATO. This will reinforce the idea that might makes right, that you can conquest other places. Russia can take Ukraine, China can take Taiwan. It is at odds with everything from American foreign policy since World War II.
10 seconds.
In the end, do I think the founders envisioned that you could use emergency tariffs to bully allies into giving you territory? No, I do not. And I think it's incumbent upon a president to make an argument for this and go through the diplomatic channels to do so.
Yeah, and we'll see if the polls change about how people feel about the argument here at home. Okay, thank you, panel. We'll see you.